can't believe I shook hands with that guy. Hey, how's it going? Pastor Todd here with your weekly video update and meditation. So it is November 18th. We're headed towards Thanksgiving. I hope you guys find a way to make it special. I know it's going to include some restrictions and very little coming up on Saturday, November 21st. So from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., me and some other members of the church will be out front. As you know, we have a hill, so I want you to drive up the hill and donate some warm clothes. We're looking for specifically for hats and gloves. If you have them, if you want to buy them, clean out your closet, but we will take any kind of warm clothing. So we're going to send this down to some folks in Bridgeport that need to stay warm. When we know that there's unfortunately people that have to live outdoors, and we hope there'll be very little of that this winter season. So please consider coming up 10 to 12 on Saturday. Tell your friends. So we're going to do something good, form of outreach and mission in this time of COVID pandemic. So there you have our outreach. Oh, I want to tell you, so if you drive up this hill and donate some, we're also going to offer you another special way to reach out during this season. So I want to keep that kind of under wraps. It's like a surprise. So I think you'll enjoy doing this second outreach project. So bring your warm clothes up the hill Saturday, November 21st, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. So there you have it. That's not the one I want to read first. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the worship coming up. This will be Ark of the Covenant Part 3. We've been constructing our own covenant to use as a North Star to navigate our spiritual growth in 2021. It will be a covenant specifically for you. And we'll talk about kind of a fun way to name a covenant. In the Bible, we see fancy words like the Adamic, the covenant with Adam, the Noahic, the covenant with Noah, etc. So we're going to name yours so you can remember it easily as you traverse the world trying to express the gospel in the way you walk with Christ. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to construct a covenant. We're going to finish constructing it this Sunday. We're going to construct that covenant getting ready for Advent, which is the Christian New Year. Starts on November 29th, the first Sunday in Advent. So come or watch. There'll be an attachment in the comments below, and you can, if you haven't listened up to now, you can complete that covenant. The complete questions that I've already asked will be in the comment section, like I said, and you can fill those out and name it. So look for that. And finally, as I promised last week, I am going to talk about the most controversial concept in our growth, our endeavor to cultivate racial sensitivity over Pentecost. And I've been doing these video meditations almost every week during Pentecost, and I've been giving you concepts, definitions from that endeavor, the nationwide endeavor to engage this systemic racism in our country. And I've saved the most powerful and perhaps controversial for last. This is white privilege. Now, before I read this definition and description, I want to say I understand when white folks say, I'm not racist. I don't say racist comments. I respect the black community. And I'm sure that's true for almost everyone, that they don't express racism verbally, and they don't believe that it's a right to make a black person or black community feel in any way that they're less than. But white privilege and systemic racism need to be understood and engaged by Christians because of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's very clear. And all sarcasm aside, if you don't think that they're parallel, engaging racism and the gospel of Jesus Christ, go back and listen to the parables. Read a bunch of parables if you can, and you'll see we need to be about the business of engaging this blight on our great country. So here is a description of white privilege. Today, white privilege is often described through the lens of Peggy McIntosh's groundbreaking essay, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. Originally published in 1988, the essay helps readers recognize white privilege by making its effects personal and tangible. It makes its effects personal and tangible. For many, white privilege was an invisible force that white people needed to recognize. It was being able to walk into a store and find that the main displays of shampoo and pantyhose, etc., were catered towards your hair type and your skin tone. Of course, I said this before. I don't know if you remember this, but many Crayola boxes had the color flesh, and it was this color flesh. So that's, I think, a very descriptive example of what systemic racism is. It was being able to turn on the television and see people of your race widely represented. It was being able to move through life without being racially profiled or unfairly stereotyped. All true. This idea of white privilege as unseen, unconscious advantages took hold. It became easy for people to interpret McIntosh's vision of white privilege, fairly or not, as mostly a matter of cosmetics and inconvenience. Those interpretations overshadowed the origins of white privilege, as well as its present-day ability to influence systemic decisions. They overshadow the fact that white privilege is both a legacy and cause of racism. And they overshadow the words of many people of color who for decades recognized white privilege as the result of conscious acts and refused to separate it from historic inequities. In short, we've forgotten that what white privilege really means, which is all of this, all at once. And if we stand behind the belief that recognizing white privilege is integral to the anti-bias work of white educators, we must offer a broader recognition. A recognition that does not silence the voices of those most affected by white privilege. A recognition that does not ignore where it comes from and why it has staying power. So if you're interested, you can read perhaps not the origin, but some of the first very well articulated instances and engagements with that concept of white privilege. So I've already given you the challenge. So maybe two challenges in two different groups. And I promise you, friends, that this is what I'm about to say does not in any way mean that I'm judging those that have trouble believing that exists. Judgment is not mine. It's not. I don't sit in a seat of judgment. Of course, that's God through Jesus Christ. So, two challenges for two separate groups. If you have a problem with that term and you don't believe that exists and are confused by it, I want you to look up that term and look for examples. I use it all the time, but you have search engines, and there's incredible resources online for learning about white privilege. If you understand that white privilege is something that's a cause and a legacy of systemic racism in our country, I want you to look for parables and parts of the Bible that you can, as Christians, carry with you in your mind, or literally carry it with you in your wallet as scripture that reminds you how to engage as a Christian this idea of white privilege. Again, a blight. Obviously, I'm in the group that believes it's very serious and very much contributes to systemic racism. So I want to leave you with this example. I'm a Star Trek fan. I think now we're called Trekkers. We used to be called Trekkies, but people in the know that it's Trekkers now. So I'm reminded of Nichelle Nichols' interviews, and it was Whoopi Goldberg being interviewed, and Nichelle Nichols, who plays Lieutenant Uhura in the show, came up in this interview. So Whoopi Goldberg just remembers as a young person seeing for the first time Nichelle Nichols, a black woman, on the bridge of the Enterprise, which was white men, and she remembers calling out to her mom and saying, "Mom, there's a black woman on television and she ain't no maid." And that's a direct quote. Seeing in this, well, I'm old enough to say this century and mean the 20th century, but very recently as the 60s, that this was a surprise to Whoopi Goldberg, that this is something new. And just keep that in mind when you think of white privilege, that when we watch superheroes, up until now, now we have the Black Panther, and I believe there was a version of Flash that was an African American. Understand that we don't notice it because we're well represented as a race and a culture. So imagine what that would mean to a black child growing up, having role models that were white. And I see it changing, but it needs to change much quicker and much more thoroughly. We have God in all this. We have God to do this. So pray for God's presence and your endeavor to grow in this, your understanding of white privilege and how we can move towards the great experiment called America's stated goals. I won't belabor this. This is a conversation I have with many people. When they apply another country and compare it with America, it's considered definitively a country, but think about the amazing difference. And I've used this one before. If somebody from Oregon and Alabama were to have a conversation, 2 states might as well be 2 countries. We're bigger than Europe. We've got more states than they have countries. So it is hard. Again, America is a great experiment, and we're called as citizens in this democracy to continue to strive and do what we can to make it better. And those goals, we share American values and Christian values, not synonymous, but parallel in many ways. So it's an opportunity to recognize political conflict as a way to engage your Christian walk and Christian heritage. So there you have it. I'll be back. I'll probably try to do one day before Thanksgiving, if anybody wants to tune in for that. And we'll be doing, that is the week before the first Sunday of Advent. So I'll be starting I'll talk about the worship coming up, and I'll do that, for ad infinitum. But I will change the focus of our challenges to grow spiritually. So join me next week at the same time, Wednesday. And that will be, I looked at my new calendar, will be November 25th, the day before Thanksgiving. Again, God bless you. I'll see you next week.